This is Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yes, the same one who starred in the movie Conan, Commando, and of course, Terminator. But the photo and videos you're seeing are from his best physical moment in history. And not just his history, but the history of all physiques of all time. The curious thing about his case is that he was a successful person in the three big things he did. First, bodybuilding. Second, his career as an actor. And third, his career as a politician. Because in case you didn't know, he managed to become governor of California. But there's a key that seems fundamental to me for having achieved all this, a constant. And in this video, we'll try to find it. Arnold Alois Schwarzenegger is born in the summer of 1947 in Thal, a humble home in a small village in Austria, surrounded by beautiful landscapes, castles, and farms. Arnold's mom, Aurelia, is a hard-working woman. His father, Gustav, is a policeman, but before that he was a soldier who fought in World War II, which forged traumas in him and a tough character that marked the family dynamic. Arnold grew up in a humble and violent home. His father made them earn their breakfast with exercise and even by competing against each other. Sober, he was affectionate, but when he drank, he became aggressive. Arnold remembers that difficult childhood without luxuries awakened in him an ambition that would accompany him all his life. In elementary school, Arnold sees a movie about the United States, which leaves him fascinated with the cities, the cars, and everything that represents the famous American dream, creating in him a desire to make a life in the United States. As a teenager, he sees another movie that will mark him for the rest of his life. But this one is Hercules, starring Reg Park, a bodybuilder with an impressive physique. Shortly after, he finds a magazine with his routine, his habits, and discovers that Reg is Mr. Universe, one of the most prestigious titles in something called bodybuilding. There he learns that Reg gets up at 5 in the morning and trains up to 3 times a day. He also understands that reaching that level requires years of effort and discipline. Inspired, Arnold starts surrounding himself with people who are on the same path as Reg, changes his diet, and trains intensely. An activity in which he turns out to be good, because in a year, he gains almost 15 kilograms of muscle and his skinny physique begins to transform. Although his father doesn't understand or approve of that obsession with male bodies, Arnold joins a club where he finds his place. He goes every day without fail, training each body part intensely, and over time designs his own routine, the famous Arnold Split. At 16, he already has a defined body. He competes in local tournaments against adults, and although he hasn't won anything yet, the motivation is there. However, his big opportunity comes with the Mr. Austria Jr., where he prepares thoroughly and gets first place. That victory is the real start of his career and the dream that will drive him to become the youngest Mr. Universe in history. In his youth, Arnold competes in weightlifting, powerlifting, and even in a stone lifting contest in Munich where he lifts around 250 kilograms. But to advance, he needs to leave Austria, and to get permission, he must complete mandatory military service. At 18, he enlists, but during his training he learns about the Mr. Europe Junior in Stuttgart, a competition for the best physique on the continent. Although he doesn't get permission, he escapes. He travels on his own, competes against 28 high-level young men, and gets the victory. That's how he becomes the best youth physique in Europe. Plus, thanks to making that decision, he meets someone important. A photographer who sees him on stage is so impressed that he offers him a job as a trainer in a gym in another city. It's not a great salary or a luxurious life, but it's his first real opportunity to live in the world he so desires and leave a village that's no longer up to his ambitions. In his new city, Arnold lives with the basics, a bed, some clothes, and a protein blender, but he's surrounded by people who share his passion, and that's enough for him. He dedicates his days to training and perfecting his routine. Motivated by that environment, he sets a new goal, to compete in Mr. Universe in London. With help from his new friends, he gathers the money to travel and compete, this time in the main category. Although he only expects to place in the top 6, he surprises everyone by getting second place at just 19 years old. This tournament changes his life, because one of the judges sees extraordinary potential in him and offers him to live with his family with the goal of preparing together for the next year's competition. And it's precisely in that house where something incredible happens. One day, a friend of the judge shows up, and that friend is none other than Reg Park, the bodybuilder Arnold had seen in the movies as a kid, his lifelong idol and the man who inspired him. Arnold says it was an extraordinary moment. They talk, connect, and even train together. In that meeting, Reg makes Arnold a promise. If the young man wins the next Mr. Universe, he'll take him to South Africa, help him do exhibitions, and he can start making money doing what he loves. With that motivation, Arnold trains like never before to take advantage of this opportunity life is giving him. Finally, 1967 arrives, and with it his presentation. During it, he poses while contracting his muscles to show every cut and muscle fiber he's achieved through work. And when it's time to announce the winners, Arnold is proclaimed the new Mr. Universe, and also the youngest winner in the history of this competition. Reg Park keeps his promise and hosts Arnold in his home in South Africa. There they receive him as part of the family. He spends his days surrounded by people who share his same passion and push him to improve every day. Reg's wife, a ballet teacher, teaches him to care for his posture, while Reg shares all his knowledge about bodybuilding. The following year, Arnold participates again in Mr. Universe and wins his second title, which puts him as the best physique in Europe. But he wants more. He dreams of getting to the United States, where the best are, and the opportunity appears when Joe Weider, a legendary figure in bodybuilding who is impressed with his physique, invites him to an event in the United States that could boost his international career. Arnold moves to Miami without thinking twice. He arrives in a United States full of opportunities, but also marked by social tensions and the Vietnam War. So bodybuilding isn't an interesting or important topic, but Arnold is about to change that. Arnold arrives in his best shape, convinced he'll keep winning as always, but when competing for the first time, he encounters a much higher level and ends up in second place. Beaten by Frank Zane, the defeat leaves him emotionally down. Plus, he's alone, doesn't master the language, and for the first time starts doubting himself. But Joe Weider, who had brought him to compete, doesn't abandon him. He buys him a ticket to Los Angeles and gets him an apartment so he can be calm and prepare better. Once settled in California, Arnold finds Gold's Gym, the heart of bodybuilding, and a place where some of the world's most impressive physiques meet. And seeing that he's not at the level to be #1 in America, he starts training at the pace of the greats and nourishes himself from the competitive environment. In that environment is where he learns about the use of anabolic steroids. He himself admits he starts using them at this stage, but always under medical supervision. Over time, Arnold starts making friends and forms his first serious relationship with Barbara Outland Baker, which marks the beginning of a more stable life in the United States. To generate income, he partners with his now friend Joe Weider and starts making money through his image. Magazines appear, he promotes supplements and events related to bodybuilding. However, he soon realizes that others earn much more than him, which motivates him to learn to do business American style. Driven by this, he enrolls to study administration and finance, improves his English, and trains in business strategies. During this period, he's offered to star in a movie called Hercules in New York. This would be his first shoot, and although he still doesn't master English and they dub him to release it, he enjoys it a lot. That same year, he competes in a new edition of Mr. Universe in London, where he faces his childhood idol, Reg Park, who at 42 returns from retirement to compete against the 23-year-old. And in that battle, Arnold wins. It's a huge achievement that he had dreamed of all his life, beating his idol and being recognized as the best. But when he gets off the stage, he doesn't feel the happiness he expected. For years, his drive was to reach what Reg Park represented, and now that he achieved it, he realizes something. What drove him was having a peak to climb. In this search for new challenges, he starts getting more into the world of acting. This without neglecting his businesses and keeping some contact with the world of competitions. However, in the midst of the transition, hard news arrives from Austria, and it's to inform him that his brother died in a car accident while driving under the influence of alcohol. Sometime later, his parents visit him in the United States, and that reunion allows him to reconnect with them after a period of distance. During the visit, he notices a change in his father. He seems calmer and less strict, as if the distance and years had softened his character. But that calm wouldn't last long. Upon returning to Austria, his father suffers a stroke. Arnold travels immediately, accompanies him for a while, and stays close to his family. However, upon returning to the United States, he receives the news of his death. Later, Arnold confesses that he completely blocked the emotions tied to the loss of his father and brother. He says he simply eliminated those experiences from his mind so as not to slow down his goals. Arnold remains determined to promote bodybuilding. He writes a book, appears on TV shows, and although he gradually becomes more known outside the sports world, he doesn't leave the competitions. That year, he faces his strongest rival, Sergio Oliva, with an imposing physique and a narrower waist. Knowing he could lose, Arnold proposes changing the stage to one with a dark background, which favors him visually. The move works, and the judges give him the victory. The following year, Arnold returns to the competition with the best physique of his entire career. That year, Lou Ferrigno also appears, a giant with impressive muscle mass, but not even he manages to beat him. Thanks to his success in bodybuilding and his determination to popularize it, Arnold becomes an idol. He gains thousands of fans and starts being recognized on the street. With more than 14 championships won, he's at his best. Taking advantage of that fame, he starts looking for opportunities as an actor. But his marked accent, the failure of the Hercules movie, and his exaggerated physique for Hollywood standards close many doors for him. 5 years pass without receiving offers, but instead of giving up, he focuses on improving. He takes acting classes and works on his pronunciation while continuing to insist on breaking through. Over time, he manages to get some small roles, like in the movie Happy Anniversary and Goodbye. where the story revolves around a couple celebrating their anniversary with comedic situations and somewhat dramatic moments that show different aspects of their relationship. There, Arnold appears playing a masseur, and a few years later, in the TV series The Streets of San Francisco, where he plays a secondary character. Although the roles he's had so far are small, everything changes when a friend of his writes a story called Stay Hungry, where the protagonist is coincidentally very similar to Arnold, a bodybuilder preparing for Mr. Universe while trying to save his gym from being demolished. The movie is directed by Bob Rafelson, who doubts giving Arnold the role due to his lack of experience and marked accent. However, Arnold had been practicing and improving a lot, so he manages to convince him in the casting. While the movie enters post-production, another decisive opportunity arises, a documentary about the world of bodybuilding titled Pumping Iron, which follows the 100 days leading up to the 1975 Mr. Olympia. Arnold, five-time champion, competes once more against Lou Ferrigno. In addition to training to the max, he uses psychological strategies to undermine his rival's confidence. When the big day of the competition arrives, the cameras are on because they're still filming the documentary. Arnold announces before going on stage that this will be his last competition. In this battle, Arnold wins his sixth Mr. Olympia and retires as the absolute champion. The premiere is delayed more than expected, but when it finally hits the screens, it becomes a phenomenon. The documentary takes Arnold to stardom outside the bodybuilding niche. It turns the Mr. Olympia competition into a global interest event, and Joe Weider, always with a good nose for business, takes advantage of the moment. He puts his efforts into expanding the Mr. Olympia brand and Arnold's image, who starts appearing on magazine covers, TV shows, and exclusive events. In the midst of that boom, Stay Hungry premieres, which ends up consolidating him as a rising figure in Hollywood. During this period, Arnold meets Maria Shriver, niece of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, better known as JFK, an important president for the United States. This connection with the Kennedy family is conveniently very important for Arnold, since Maria becomes his partner and opens doors for him in influential political and social circles. In fact, later on, this relationship might favor him in becoming governor of California, so remember that. Once Arnold takes a break from competitive bodybuilding, he focuses all his energy on conquering Hollywood. He gets an agent who opens a key door for him, the role of Conan the Barbarian. Arnold plays an imposing warrior with a dominant physique and great screen presence. The story revolves around Conan, a boy who loses everything when Thulsa Doom eliminates his parents. They enslave him, train him as a gladiator, and when freed, he decides to take revenge. On his path, he faces enemies, magic, betrayals, a strange cult, and even lives a tragic love story. The shoot is grueling. Arnold gets up at 5 in the morning to train with swords and film demanding scenes, some so intense that he ends up really bleeding. But all this effort is worth it because the movie is a resounding success that grosses about $90 million at the box office. An impressive figure for the time. Afterward, he does a promotional tour that takes him to several countries and starts consolidating himself as an international action movie star. Later, he applies for U.S. citizenship, and after studying a lot, he gets it. Arnold says with pride, "I was born in Austria, and I'm proud of that, but I was made in the United States." At that time, action cinema with strong protagonists dominates the box office, and figures like Arnold start gaining ground. One night, at a party, he crosses paths with the renowned producer Mike Medavoy, who proposes an action movie with high chances of commercial success, specifically the proposal for a role as a killing machine with few lines and no emotional depth. But let's say that at first, Arnold isn't enthusiastic. However, after thinking it over for several days, he ends up accepting the lead role in the movie Terminator. If you haven't seen it, I'll tell you what it's about. Terminator tells the story of a dystopian future where machines have taken control of the world and are fighting to eliminate humanity. From that future, a killer cyborg called Terminator is sent back to 1984 with the mission to eliminate Sarah Connor, a young woman whose existence is crucial for the human resistance that will arise years later. Sarah is an ordinary woman who knows nothing about her destiny, but soon becomes the Terminator's target. To protect her, another man from the future named Kyle Reese is also sent back in time. His mission is to take care of Sarah and ensure that her son, who will lead the resistance in the future, is born. After the premiere, the character becomes iconic and leaves a phrase that goes straight into cinema history: "I'll be back." A curious fact is that originally Arnold was supposed to say something like, "I'll come back soon," but he didn't like it. He felt that "be back" sounded more like a machine. So in the end, he said, "I'll be back," and the phrase ended up becoming one of the most memorable in cinema. This story ends up taking Arnold to worldwide stardom, as it becomes one of the most memorable movies and characters in cinema history. On the personal side, he marries Maria Shriver in a big wedding, and shortly after, his first daughter is born. While forming his family, his fame keeps growing nonstop. Now he doesn't have to do castings. Instead, producers seek him out directly to offer him lead roles. Shortly after the wedding, He films Commando, where he plays a former Special Forces soldier who has to rescue his kidnapped daughter. The movie has everything that sells at that time: pure action, explosions, fights, and intense scenes that go with his physique. And although the plot is simple, it becomes another success. Then comes Predator. Here Arnold plays Dutch, the leader of a military team that faces an alien creature in the jungle. Action, suspense, and science fiction that quickly becomes a classic. Added to this exposure, another giant success premieres, Twins, a comedy with Danny DeVito. No one expected to see a guy known mainly for action in an absurd comedy, but the duo turns out to be a hit with more than $100 million, which makes the public start seeing Arnold as someone very versatile. He starts appearing in commercials, interviews, and even ramen ads in Japan. He also releases The Running Man, where he plays a man wrongly accused and forced to participate in a sadistic TV show where he must fight for his life. The story takes place in a dystopian 2017 and is loosely based on Stephen King's novel The Running Man. Then he stars in Red Heat, where he plays a Soviet policeman who must collaborate with an American officer to catch a drug trafficker. After that comes Kindergarten Cop, a mix of action and kids' comedy. There he takes the role of an undercover agent who has to pose as a preschool teacher to solve a case. And right at the top, he stars in one of the biggest cinema successes, Terminator 2, Judgment Day. This time he's not the villain, but the hero. Years after the first movie, Sarah Connor is interned in a psychiatric hospital, and her son John lives with a foster family. From the future come two machines, the T-1000 designed to eliminate him, and a Terminator played by Arnold, reprogrammed to protect him. Arnold saves John, they rescue Sarah, and although she doesn't trust him at first, she ends up accepting his help. Together they look for Miles Dyson, the creator of Skynet, to prevent the apocalypse. Dyson decides to collaborate and destroys his work. In the final battle, they manage to eliminate the T-1000, and the Terminator himself sacrifices himself to prevent his technology from being used. Arnold Schwarzenegger was key to the project's realization. He insisted to the new producers to buy the rights and reactivate the project. When everything was finally resolved, the original team returned, James Cameron as director, Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor, and Arnold this time as the good guy. Behind the scenes, the production was huge. The visual effects were revolutionary for the time, and every penny showed on screen. Terminator 2 wasn't easy to pull off. For years, the franchise rights were stuck in legal disputes, and there were doubts about whether it was technically possible to create the new villain, the T-1000, with the visual effects of the time. But James Cameron didn't give up. The shoot was massive. It was filmed in more than 20 locations between California and New Mexico. One of the most iconic places was a Los Angeles canal where the chase with motorcycles and trucks happens. To film there, they had to divert an entire river. The psychiatric hospital, the steel mill at the end, and the Cyberdyne offices were also real sets that the team adapted for stunts and explosions. Plus, it was the most expensive movie in history at that time, with a budget of over $100 million. But before premiering, it had already recovered a large part thanks to the sale of international rights. As soon as it premiered, the theaters filled up for weeks. The box office broke records, and the reviews were great. And of course, the phrase, "Hasta la vista, baby," became part of popular culture. After the phenomenon that was Terminator 2, Arnold keeps chaining successes. One of them is Total Recall, a movie that mixes science fiction, action, and a futuristic world full of deceptions where he plays a man who discovers his entire life might be an implanted lie. After that, he has a small stumble with the movie Last Action Hero. But instead of staying still, Arnold meets again with James Cameron and proposes a new idea to him. He wants to make a spy movie with lots of action, comedy, and with Jamie Lee Curtis as the co-star. And that's how True Lies is born. Despite his previous success, the landscape starts changing for Arnold. In 1997, he acts in Batman and Robin playing Mr. Freeze. But let's say this movie is a failure, which makes Arnold start questioning his strength as a lead. And to make things worse, around that time, Arnold suffers a serious health problem and has to undergo open-heart surgery. His mother travels to be with him after his surgery, but shortly after the woman returns home, she dies due to the same heart problem that Arnold had suffered. Although he had experienced losses before with his father and brother, that blow is very hard for Arnold. That's why he decides to take a sabbatical year, a long break to recover physically and emotionally. The problem is that time away from the screen ends up affecting him. Offers drop, important roles simply stop coming, and the only one he takes with the movie Collateral Damage becomes a failure. And that's when he realizes his era as an action star is over. He reached the top, gave it all, but now he needs something else, another challenge, something that gives him back that feeling of building something big. And that's when he decides to enter politics. To understand everything that comes next, we have to put ourselves in context. At this point in the story, we're in 2002, and the state of California is going through a complicated crisis. There are power outages, economic deficit problems, a general feeling that the government isn't working, and the population blames all those problems on the current governor, Gray Davis. Arnold sees this situation as a unique opportunity to enter politics through the big door, but there's a problem. At this moment, he's right in the middle of filming Terminator 3, so what he does is start testing the waters little by little. In interviews, he subtly shows his interest in politics, and at public events, he throws phrases that mix humor with proposals. He uses his classic, "Hasta la vista, baby," to say that he could say goodbye to the problems. And luckily for Arnold, shortly after, they remove Governor Gray Davis, and the candidate who was going to run for the Republican Party drops out. His wife is completely against it at first. Remember that she belongs to the Kennedy family and has already lived the risks of politics up close, like when her uncle was shot. The decision is complicated, but when they invite him to The Tonight Show and the interviewer asks if he's going to run, he answers live. In front of millions of people, the man who's failing the people like no one else is Gray Davis. He's failing all of us. And that's why I'm going to run for governor of the state of California. A statement that marks the start of his official candidacy. Many in Hollywood see it as madness. Going from action star to politician sounds ridiculous, but Arnold is convinced, and besides, he has something very few have: the total backing of the Kennedy family. The curious thing is that although he was already announcing it publicly, privately he had neither a team nor a campaign name. He moves fast, gathers experienced people, and the news explodes worldwide. He takes advantage of his fame, launches ads, tours the state, and gains support. In debates against experienced politicians, Arnold is simply himself, an authenticity that sets him apart from the rest of the politicians. However, 5 days before the elections, the Los Angeles Times publishes accusations against Arnold from 6 women for inappropriate touching and comments in the past. The blow is hard, but Arnold responds by admitting he made some inappropriate jokes in the past and denies major abuses. Finally, the voting comes, and it's confirmed. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the bodybuilder, Terminator actor, and Austrian immigrant, is proclaimed governor of the most populous state in the United States. During his term, Arnold faces strong criticism, especially for handling the fiscal deficit. When he took office in 2003, the deficit was around $8 billion. But toward the end of his administration, after the 2008 financial crisis, it grew more than 200%. To face it, he applied cuts in sectors like public education, health, social services, and state personnel salaries. Plus, some of his stances, like his opposition to same-sex marriage and certain comments considered outdated, caused controversy. To turn those criticisms around, he appoints Susan Kennedy as chief of staff, a Democratic, lesbian, and feminist woman. On environmental issues, he implemented some of the country's most ambitious laws to reduce emissions, which even earned him praise from President Barack Obama. During those years, he distanced himself almost completely from cinema, stayed close to the people, and was re-elected in 2006. But despite the dedication, his government left an ambiguous legacy. Important advances in ecological and political inclusion issues, but also a complicated fiscal legacy that the state had to face in later years. His life takes a turn after leaving office, as he separates from Maria Shriver after it became public that he had an extramarital child with a domestic employee. This situation is the trigger for a divorce after 25 years of marriage. The news shakes his public image and plunges him into a very dark personal stage. But as he's done so many times in his life, he gets back up, returns to cinema, and gets a second chance with The Expendables, where he shares the screen with Sylvester Stallone. From there, he resumes his path as an action actor. He participates in movies like The Last Stand, where he plays a retired sheriff who must face a cartel trying to cross the border. In Sabotage, he leads an elite DEA team facing internal betrayals. In Maggie, he takes an emotional turn with a more intimate role, playing a father who cares for his daughter infected by a zombie virus. And he also puts on the Terminator suit again in Genesis and Dark Fate, keeping alive the franchise that turned him into a legend. There are many things that seem worth highlighting from Arnold's story, like his discipline or ability to plan for the future. But a factor that seemed equally determining for his achievements, and that is often overlooked, was the people he surrounded himself with. After competing in Stuttgart, the photographer invited him to work in a gym where he sometimes slept on a bench, but he was right where he needed to be, among people who thought like him, who demanded themselves daily, and who sought similar goals. Then he met and built a relationship with Joe Weider, who was his guide and gave him many opportunities. In California, he arrived at Gold's Gym. There he coincided with the sports pioneers, who taught him to refine techniques, understand the mental game, study the business, and also exposed him to the field's practices like steroid use. The environment gave him tools, networks, and visibility, and like any high-performance setting, it brought benefits and risks. All this happened when his identity was still settling. So all those people and environments ended up normalizing habits, pushing routines, changing his ways of thinking, And fortunately, they were environments that reinforced everything he was already seeking. Just as he sculpted his body in the gym, the environment he immersed himself in ended up sculpting his character. We usually think that absolutely everything depends on willpower, but the environment is the soil where that willpower can grow or fade. The people around us, what we normalize, what we learn by imitation, all that guides our path often without us noticing. That's why it's important not only to look forward. I think we also have to look to the sides and ask ourselves who is walking with me. Do they push me? Do they challenge me? Do they add to me or hold me back? The reality is that Arnold didn't get there alone. No one does. An understanding that doesn't take away from his story. Of course not. On the contrary, it makes it more real, since there's also merit in knowing how to choose the places and people to grow with.